So, Donte, I want to start with you. Who do you think has the best chance?
Listen, it's a lot of excitement around this campaign. We know that Vice President Harris is going to look for somebody that's coming from a battleground state that gives her an edge in a state that she must win in order to take the White House. We also know that she's going to want somebody that can appeal to that Rust Belt region, that can appeal to a demographic of men that she may not be able to connect with. When you talk about the candidates that's there, they've whittled it down to 3 people. We're talking about Tim Walz, who's the Minnesota governor, Josh Shapiro, the PA governor, and my favorite right now is Mark Kelly. He's a senator from Arizona. He's a veteran. I think that gives her a strong presence with the military. He's familiar. He's in active duty. And I think he provides her with that gap that she needs. He fills that gap for her to allow her to connect with certain people, give her credibility with the armed forces, and really provides her with a stable force that she can have as her running mate going into this election process.
I want to go to the, actually, you know, Armen, a lot of people are thinking that who she chooses isn't as important because of the fact that she'll be like another 4 years of Biden. What are you hearing?
So I just, if you want to look at it like this,
let's let Armen respond to that.
Donte is relatively right. Donald Trump is not going to lose any of the states that he won in 2020, and I think he's also going to win the state of Nevada regardless. So you look at the battleground states. I think Mark Kelly is at the top of the list, but I also really think that Governor Shapiro in Pennsylvania could be a very good case because he has a very strong record. Both of them are slightly more moderate. Actually, anybody that she picks as a vice presidential candidate is going to be more moderate on a lot of the positions. And if she's going to rely on that individual going out and broadcasting those more moderate tones and at a more measured pace, then her record, which Democrats right now are working very hard to redefine and actually change the history on a little bit. So all Donald Trump needs to do is flip a couple of those battleground states. I don't think he's going to lose North Carolina, even if Roy Cooper becomes the vice president. So I think you're looking at, you know, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Michigan, although I don't think Whitmer would be a very good choice either.
Okay, let's listen to what JD Vance brings to the ticket, according to Congressman Mike Walz, who was on the Hill Sunday. Let's listen to that bite.
I was the co-chair of the party platform with the RNC. We dedicated the platform that President Trump personally edited and weighed in on to the forgotten man and woman in middle America. And JD Vance's life story, his experience, his lived experience, I think embodies that. And it's going to play incredibly well in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, places that have been gutted by bad trade deals, by fentanyl, and by the opioid crisis.
Okay, so I kind of flipped really quickly between what Vice President Kamala Harris's vice president would be, try to keep this stuff straight in 2024, right? And what the newly named running mate for former President Trump, JD Vance, would bring to the ticket. So, Armen, I'm going to just ask you really quickly, does JD bring an edge? There's been a lot of talk about him on social media. Some of it has just been a distraction. But what do you think he delivers? Because some people are still questioning his selection.
Yes, I understand a lot of those concerns. His youth, his you know, he's only been there for in Senate for a couple of years. But instead of necessarily delivering one particular state that he is from, it's that connection that he has with the audience is, hey, I'm like one of you. I'm the common man. I'm a working man. I came from very humble roots. So his selection, I think, was twofold. Number one, Donald Trump wanted somebody that he figured was going to be loyal to him and align with him, but also could be a really big blow to Democrats' chances of winning the Rust Belt or that blue wall. I think that is the main reason why JD Vance was picked, and I think it's going to have some impact. We'll see how much.
All right. And Donte, I have to ask you, in terms of the selection of a VP, I mean, really, we've heard some of the back and forth between Vice President Harris when she was still technically just considering that position and her attacks on JD Vance. Do you believe that Vance has a bit of an Achilles heel when it comes to Kamala Harris's experience?
I do. But the issue is with vice presidents, normally they don't have true impact on the election. I think it's different for the Democrats in this process, though, because Kamala Harris was vice president. Her platform is going to be new, and they have to introduce that to a lot of voters. I know there's some excitement, but not everybody knows who Kamala Harris is. So her VP pick is going to be important.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.